My name's Amelia, and I'm 29 years old. For the past 5 years, I've been making a living as an event planner. Weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, you name it, I've organized it. It's not what I thought I'd be doing when I was younger, but life has a funny way of surprising you. I studied economics in college, but that's not where my passion lay. During my time there, I found myself drawn to organizing educational and entertainment events on campus. It started small, a study group here, a movie night there. But before I knew it, I was the go-to person for any event that needed planning. After graduation, I knew I couldn't see myself crunching numbers in an office. So, I took a leap of faith and started my own event planning business. It wasn't easy at first. I had to build my reputation from scratch, taking on any job I could get. No event is too small, I'd tell potential clients with a smile, even as I worried about making rent that month. But slowly, surely, word spread. One satisfied client led to another, and before I knew it, I had more work than I could handle. 5 years flew by, and here I am, with a thriving business and a reputation I'm proud of. Today, I'm sitting across from Mr. Johnson, a successful businessman who's turning 50 next month. He wants a party to remember, and I'm determined to give him just that. So, Mr. Johnson, I say, pulling out my notebook, what did you have in mind for your big day? He leans back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. Well, I was thinking something classy. Maybe a black tie affair at the Grand Hotel? I nod, jotting down notes. That's a great venue. We could do a classic Hollywood theme. Red carpet entrance, paparazzi-style photographers. As I'm mid-sentence, my phone buzzes. I glance at it, ready to ignore the call, but the name on the screen makes me pause. It's my sister, Sarah. Now, I should probably explain about my family. It's complicated. I have a younger sister, Sarah, who's 7 years my junior. She's always been the apple of our parents' eye. Don't get me wrong, my parents took care of me too, but there was always a difference in how they treated us. When I went to college, they couldn't find the money to help me out. It was my grandmother who stepped in, bless her soul. But a few years later, when Sarah went to college, suddenly, my parents had no problem paying for her tuition and a rented apartment. It stung, I won't lie. Over the years, I've learned to accept it, but it's left a mark. I don't talk to my family much these days. So, seeing Sarah's name on my phone is a surprise. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, I say, standing up. Would you excuse me for a moment? It's my sister, and she rarely calls. He waves me off with a kind smile. Of course, take your time. I step out of the room and answer the phone. Sarah, is everything okay? Amelia. Her voice is bright, excited. You need to come over to Mom and Dad's right away. We have big news. I sigh, knowing I'll regret this. Alright, I'll be there as soon as I can. I hang up and return to Mr. Johnson, apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry, but I have a family emergency. Can we reschedule for tomorrow? He's understanding, thankfully. I drove to my parents' house, with a knot in my stomach. It had been months since I'd last been there, and I wasn't exactly looking forward to this impromptu family gathering. I rang the doorbell, and my mother answered, a forced smile on her face. Amelia, dear, come in. The living room was crowded. My father sat in his usual armchair, Sarah was perched on the couch, practically vibrating with excitement. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize, about my age, with a polite smile. Amelia. Sarah jumped up, grabbing the man's hand and pulling him forward. This is Mark, my fiancé. I blinked, surprised. Fiancé? Well, congratulations. Mark seemed nice enough, but I couldn't help wondering how long they'd been together. Sarah had never mentioned him before. So, I said, turning to Sarah, is this why you called me over? To meet Mark? Sarah's smile widened. Well, partly. But there's more. She clasped her hands together, practically bouncing. We're having an engagement party soon, and I want you to plan it. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. Oh, Sarah, I don't know. I'm pretty booked up right now. Nonsense, my father interrupted, his voice gruff. This is your sister we're talking about. Family comes first. I bit back a retort about how family hadn't come first when I needed help with college. Instead, I forced a smile. It's not that simple, Dad. I have commitments to other clients. But you're the best at this stuff, Sarah insisted. And I want the most amazing engagement party ever. Of course it'll be free. You wouldn't charge your own sister, would you? I looked around the room, seeing expectant faces. Even Mark looked like he assumed I'd do this for nothing. I felt cornered. Okay, I said finally, my voice tight. I'll organize it for free. But you'll need to cover all the other expenses, venue, catering, decorations, music, everything else. Sarah squealed and hugged me. You're the best, Amelia. We'll pay for everything else, promise. As I left the house an hour later, after listening to Sarah's grand ideas for her perfect engagement party, I felt a mixture of regret and resignation. I'd have to call Mr. Johnson and cancel our rescheduled meeting. There went a lucrative contract. Back home, I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Johnson's number. Mr. Johnson? It's Amelia. I'm so sorry, but I won't be able to take on your birthday party after all. A family obligation has come up. My friend Lisa is also an event planner. She's excellent. I can give you her contact information if you'd like. After passing along Lisa's details and apologizing once more, I hung up. I stared at my phone, a sense of unease growing in my stomach. I'd just turned down a major client for a job I wasn't even getting paid for. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparations. I secured a beautiful restaurant for the date Sarah wanted. It wasn't easy, the place was popular and usually booked months in advance. But Tony, the owner of the restaurant, couldn't resist my pressure. I also worked with the chef to create a spread that would impress even the most discerning guests. Then came the decorations, the music, the invitations, every detail had to be perfect. I called my go-to DJ, Mike, to book him for the event. He agreed, albeit reluctantly. I had similar conversations with all my usual contractors, the florist, the cake baker, the photographer. They all trusted me enough to agree to delayed payment, but I could sense their unease. As the days passed, I found myself turning down other jobs to focus on Sarah's party. It was eating into my income, but I told myself it would be worth it to see my sister happy. Finally, with everything arranged, I sat down to create the invoice. I carefully itemized every expense, from the venue rental to the last flower in the centerpieces. The total was substantial. I took a deep breath and emailed the invoice to Sarah. There, I muttered to myself. All done. That evening, my phone rang. It was Sarah. Hey sis, I answered. Did you get the invoice? There was a moment of silence, then Sarah's voice came through, sickly sweet. Amelia, darling, there must be some mistake. Why are you sending me a bill? I frowned, confused. What do you mean? It's the invoice for all the expenses for your engagement party. Remember, you said you'd cover everything except my fee? Sarah laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. Oh, Amelia. I thought you understood. You're supposed to pay for all of this. You make so much money with your business. I was speechless. My mind raced, thinking of all the vendors waiting to be paid, all the promises I'd made based on Sarah's word. Sarah, listen to me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I organized this for free, which is already a huge favor. I can't pay for everything else too. You promised. But Sarah had already hung up. I tried calling my parents, hoping they could talk some sense into Sarah. But to my horror, they took her side. They insisted I should pay, that it was my duty as the successful daughter. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. How could they do this to me? How could they expect me to bankrupt myself for a party? As I sat there, trying to figure out what to do, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a post from Sarah on social media. Curious, I clicked on it. "Can't wait for tomorrow's engagement party," the post read. "So excited to celebrate with everyone. We've spent so much to make it perfect." In that moment, something snapped inside me. If Sarah wanted to play games, well, two could play at that. My fingers trembled as I dialed the restaurant's number. It was late, but I knew Tony would still be there, closing up after the night's service. "Tony? It's Amelia. I'm so sorry, but I need to cancel tomorrow's event. I'll pay you a cancellation fee. And I'll make this up to you, I swear." Tony sighed. "All right, Amelia. I trust you. But this isn't like you." One by one, I called all the vendors. The florist, the DJ, the cake baker, everyone. Each call was painful, each explanation more humiliating than the last. By the time I finished, my savings account was significantly lighter, but at least my professional relationships were intact. I'd paid everyone their fees and cancellation charges out of my own pocket. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and settled in front of my computer. I knew Sarah would be live streaming her arrival at the restaurant. I wanted to see this. Right on schedule, Sarah's beaming face appeared on my screen. She was outside the restaurant, surrounded by a group of excited-looking friends and family members. "We're here," Sarah chirped into her phone camera. "I can't wait to show you guys everything. It's going to be amazing." I watched as she confidently strode up to the restaurant doors, her fiancé Mark in tow. She reached for the handle, still chattering away to her viewers. "And here we, oh." The smile froze on Sarah's face as she tugged at the door. It didn't budge. "That's weird," she laughed nervously, trying again. "It must be stuck." But it wasn't stuck. Sarah's eyes widened as she finally noticed the sign on the door. "Event cancelled," it read in bold letters. The live stream erupted in confused comments. Sarah's face paled as she turned to Mark, who looked equally bewildered. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction as I watched the chaos unfold. It was petty, I knew, but after years of being the family doormat, it felt good to finally stand up for myself. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Sarah." "Amelia," she screeched. "What the hell is going on? The restaurant is closed. Everything's ruined." I kept my voice calm. "Well, Sarah, since you refused to pay for the event you asked me to organize, I had to cancel it. I couldn't let my contractors go unpaid." But what about the food?" Mark's voice came through faintly in the background. "Where's all the food we were supposed to have?" I couldn't help but smile a little. "Oh, the food? I donated it to a homeless shelter. At least someone will enjoy it." More screaming followed, but I'd had enough. I hung up the phone. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. My mother's voice came through, shrill and angry. "Amelia, how could you do this to your sister? We raised you better than this." I felt a surge of frustration. "Mom, did Sarah tell you what she tried to do? She wanted me to pay for everything." "So what?" My father's voice boomed in the background. "You're doing well for yourself. You could have helped your sister out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, we're talking about thousands of dollars here. I'm not made of money." "You're just being selfish," my mother snapped. "Your poor sister is heartbroken. Her special day is ruined because of your greed." I tried to stay calm, but their words were cutting deep. "Greed? I organized everything for free. I even paid cancellation fees out of my own pocket." But they weren't listening. My mother's next words felt like a slap in the face. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice cold. "I think you did this because you're jealous. You're almost 30, Amelia. No husband, no children. You couldn't stand to see her getting married while you have no one. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. How dare they? How dare they twist this around and make me the villain? As I sat there, trying to process everything that had happened, an idea struck me. If Sarah and Mark had promised to pay for everything, where did that money go? They must have had it, right? I opened my laptop and drafted an email. In it, I detailed all the expenses I had incurred, including the cancellation fees. I demanded that Sarah and Mark reimburse me for every penny. If you don't pay, I wrote, my fingers flying over the keyboard, I'll be forced to take legal action. I hit send before I could second guess myself. It was a bold move, I knew, but I was done being the family pushover. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing again. This time, it was a barrage of text messages from Sarah and Mark. I steeled myself and opened them. The messages were a mix of threats and insults. Sarah called me every name in the book, while Mark threatened to ruin me if I tried to take them to court. I saved screenshots of every message. If this did end up in court, I wanted all the evidence I could get. I also needed advice from someone who might have some insight into Sarah's fiancé and his family. That's when I remembered my Aunt Linda. She always seemed to know all the town gossip. Maybe she could tell me something about Mark and his family. I dialed her number, hoping she'd be willing to talk. Aunt Linda? It's Amelia. I need to ask you something about Sarah's fiancé. Aunt Linda's voice crackled through the phone, warm and familiar. Amelia, dear. It's been ages. What do you want to know about Mark? I took a deep breath. Well, I was wondering if you knew anything about his family, their financial situation. Oh, honey, Aunt Linda chuckled. You're asking the right person. The Thompsons, that's Mark's family, they're quite well off. They own a chain of laundromats across the city, and word is they've got their fingers in some lucrative real estate deals too. I felt my jaw drop. Wait, what? They're wealthy? Oh yes, very much so, Aunt Linda continued, oblivious to my shock. Why, I heard they gave Mark a hefty sum to arrange that engagement party. $30,000, if the rumors are true. My mind was reeling. $30,000? And they had tried to make me pay for everything? After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for a few minutes. Then, determination set in. I knew what I had to do next. It took some digging, but I managed to find the address of Mark's parents. Without giving myself time to second-guess my decision, I got in my car and drove there. The house was impressive, a large, well-maintained property in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A middle-aged woman answered, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. Can I help you? Mrs. Thompson? I asked. When she nodded, I continued, I'm Amelia, Sarah's sister. I need to talk to you and your husband about Mark and the engagement party. She looked surprised, but invited me in. Soon, I was sitting in their living room, facing both of Mark's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I began, my voice steadier than I felt, I'm here because I think you should know what happened with the engagement party. Over the next half hour, I explained everything. How Sarah had asked me to organize the party for free. How they had promised to pay for everything else, but then refused. How I had been forced to cancel everything and pay the cancellation fees myself. As I spoke, I saw the shock and dismay growing on their faces. When I finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Mr. Thompson spoke, his voice tight with anger. We gave Mark $30,000 for this party. He told us everything was paid for. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. They believed me. Mr. Thompson left the room and returned a few minutes later with his checkbook. He wrote out a check for the full amount I had spent, plus a little extra for my trouble. It's the least we can do, he said, handing it to me. And don't worry, we'll be having a very serious conversation with Mark and Sarah about their behavior. As I left their house, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also sadness. This whole ordeal had exposed some ugly truths about my sister and her fiancé. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with texts. It was Sarah and Mark again, but this time their tone was very different. Gone were the threats and insults, replaced by panicked apologies and pleas for forgiveness. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine about the fallout from my visit to the Thompsons. Aunt Linda kept me updated. "You won't believe this, Amelia," she said during one of our phone calls. "Mark's parents have cut him off completely. No more monthly allowance, no financial support for the wedding, nothing." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. "Really? That's quite drastic." Aunt Linda's voice lowered conspiratorially. "Oh, honey, they were furious. Apparently, they don't take kindly to being lied to and having their money misused. Can't say I blame them." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What about the wedding? Is it still happening?" There was a pause, then Aunt Linda chuckled. "Well, that's the kicker. Without Mommy and Daddy's money, Mark and Sarah can't afford the lavish wedding they were planning. Last I heard, they've postponed it indefinitely." My parents, predictably, didn't see it that way. They blamed me for Sarah's misfortune, conveniently forgetting that it was her own actions that had led to this situation. "You've ruined your sister's life," my mother said during one particularly heated phone call. "Are you happy now?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mom, Sarah, and Mark tried to scam me out of thousands of dollars. They lied to everyone, including Mark's parents. How is that my fault?" But it was like talking to a brick wall. In their eyes, Sarah could do no wrong, and I was the villain who had destroyed her happiness. Despite the family drama, my life went on. I threw myself back into my work, rebuilding the client base I had neglected during the engagement party fiasco. Slowly but surely, things started to look up. One day, as I was leaving a meeting with a new client, I ran into Mr. Johnson, the man whose 50th birthday party I had canceled to work on Sarah's engagement. "Amelia," he called out, a smile on his face. "How have you been?" I felt a pang of guilt. "Mr. Johnson, I'm so sorry about canceling on you like that. It was unprofessional of me." He waved off my apology. "No need for that. Your friend Lisa did a wonderful job with the party. But I have to say, I missed your personal touch." An idea struck me. "Well, if you're planning any events in the future, I'd love the opportunity to make it up to you." Mr. Johnson's eyes twinkled. "As a matter of fact, my company's 25th anniversary is coming up. How would you like to handle that?" As I walked away, contract in hand, I couldn't help but feel that things were finally looking up. Yes, my relationship with my family was strained, but my business was thriving, and I had my self-respect intact. One evening, as I was poring over seating arrangements, a loud knock at my apartment door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. To my shock, I saw Sarah and Mark standing there. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" Sarah brazenly pushed past me into the apartment, Mark trailing behind her. "We're moving in," she announced. I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Sarah said, her tone accusatory. "Because of you, Mark's parents cut us off. No money for the wedding, no allowance, nothing. So, we decided we're going to live here." I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sheer audacity of their plan was almost impressive. "You can't be serious. This is my home. You can't just decide to move in." Mark stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. "You owe us, Amelia. You ruined everything." I felt my patience snap. "I owe you nothing. You tried to scam me, remember? Now get out of my apartment." As I shut the door behind them, I heard Sarah's parting shot, "You'll be sorry." A few days later, I returned home from a meeting to find my apartment door surrounded by a strange, foamy substance. It took me a moment to realize what I was seeing: construction foam hardened around the entire perimeter of my door. Furious, I called a locksmith service to remove the foam and replace my locks. As I waited, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, approached me. "Amelia, dear," she said, concern etched on her face. "I saw what happened. I have it on video if you need it." Sure enough, Mrs. Chen's security camera had captured Sarah and Mark in the act of vandalizing my door. The footage was clear as day. Armed with this evidence, I went straight to the police station. I filed a report for property damage and requested a restraining order against both Sarah and Mark. The legal process was draining, but ultimately satisfying. The court fined Sarah and Mark for the damage to my apartment and ordered them to cover the costs of repairs. More importantly, they were banned from coming within 500 feet of me for the next 2 years. When my parents found out, they were livid, not at Sarah, of course, but at me. They couldn't believe I'd taken legal action against my own sister. "How could you do this to your family?" my mother wailed over the phone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "No, Mom. The question is, how could you support Sarah after everything she's done? I'm done being the family scapegoat." With that, I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. It hurt, cutting ties with my family, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work. Mr. Johnson's anniversary party was a resounding success, earning me glowing reviews and a slew of new clients. As I stood at the back of the beautifully decorated hall, watching the guests enjoy themselves, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Yes, I'd lost my family, but I'd gained something far more valuable: self-respect and the knowledge that I could stand on my own 2 feet.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.